Welcome to the Underground, the Steel City Underground, the black and gold standard for Pittsburgh Steelers coverage. Now, here are your hosts, Brian E. Roach and Zach Meckler.
Hey everybody, welcome to another edition of the Steel City Underground podcast. My name is Brian E. Roach. You know all the other things. I'm just going to say hashtag the refs stink because they do, and I'm just going to live with that. So on this edition of the podcast, my brother from another mother, Joseph Kuzma, has injured himself, and as a result, he is unavailable, although there's other reasons he's unavailable, which we won't go into here. But once again, our younger brother from another mother, the professor of football, one Zachariah Meckler, has graciously agreed to step in. So, Zach, how you doing?
It's draft season, Brian. Can't complain at all. We're here. We're living it. I know the Super Bowl hasn't happened yet, but I don't care because the Steelers aren't in it. So I'm just living my life right now with the draft stuff.
Well, of course you are. And we may as well, let's talk about the playoffs real quick because we'll get it out of the way since who cares? But, the Titans lost. I'm not surprised the Titans lost, but at the same time, I'm sad the Titans lost. I did pick them, but I picked them with my heart, not my head. Mahomes looked fantastic, again. And then the 49ers, this is my upside, okay? Because the downside is the 49ers could win their sixth Super Bowl, which annoys me. But my upside is overrated Green Bay quarterback Aaron Rodgers remains an overrated Green Bay quarterback Aaron Rodgers, and that makes me happy.
I'm happy personally that I was one of two people at SCU to accurately pick both games. Gonna put that little shameless plug in there. But I think realistically the Packers, I don't know. I've been saying this for a while. I don't know how they're a 13-3 team. No offense to any Packers fans that for whatever reason might be listening into this podcast, but they're much more of a finesse team that wants to kind of get into a track meet with you, and they're not really willing to lay the hammer down and get into a physical matchup. And I think that kind of was on display when you look at what the 49ers were able to do with their run game. I mean, those are high school low-end numbers. Like when you have a running back going for over 200 yards on those carries, that's something you see from like a small high school in the middle of Iowa. You don't see that from an NFL team in the NFC Championship game, no less. So that's why I thought the 49ers were the easy pick for that game. And the Titans came out of the gate doing what I thought they needed to do to beat the Chiefs, and they controlled the clock. Derrick Henry was running the ball effectively, and they got out to 17-7. That kind of felt like it was going to be, if they can just control the clock, prevent any big mistakes, and not allow Pat Mahomes to come in and take the game over, they would have success. And Pat Mahomes came in, took the game over, and they didn't have any success. So I think it kind of went about the way I expected it to. The Chiefs are a sleeping giant whenever their offense is clicking on all cylinders. Pat Mahomes is the best quarterback in football. I'm happy for Andy Reid. I've always been a fan of his as a coach. I don't necessarily care about the Chiefs one way or the other, but I wouldn't mind seeing them win. I'm personally picking the Chiefs to win in Miami in the Super Bowl this year, but honestly, I think it should be a good game. I think it should be a much more exciting game than we saw last year, the Patriots and Rams, which is all I care about because I just want a good Super Bowl. And the Patriots aren't there, the Ravens aren't there. I can't complain no matter what happens.
Right, I'm going with you on. I'm going Chiefs all the way here because that's why wouldn't I? I don't want the 49ers to get their sixth Super Bowl win. And I like the idea of Mahomes winning at this point. I like the idea of Andy Reid winning, not in Philly and having everyone near me that lives around me eat crow and be miserable because Andy Reid finally won a Super Bowl. So I'm with you. Chiefs all the way. Let's go. Hoo-ah, hoo-ah, whatever it is. Ooh-ah. I don't know what their weird chant thing is that they do. I can't do it. I don't care. That'll take care of that, and then that'll put a postage paid to the end of the season. I wanted to drift back on our last podcast just because we had some interesting comments, and I wanted to just respond to some. We had a couple guys, Jarrett Sherry and Jimmy Tate, who wanted us to do more than just talk. And while I would love to do more than just talk, we don't know whether we are equipped right now to do a lot of imagery when we do the editing of this. Because for those who don't know, Joe is the king of editing. And he does, we record our podcast and Joe produces our podcast even when he can't be on the podcast. And sometimes, that means he's got a limited amount of time to do so at times. And, getting imagery in there is not always easy, and it doesn't translate over, obviously, to the other formats because this is a multi-format podcast. We're not just on YouTube, we're everywhere. And obviously those images don't show up, so it's doing it for that. But we've talked about it, and it's, I don't want to say no to you guys, but it may happen. The other question I wanted to address was Ron Chess, who's a frequent commenter. Ron, we appreciate the commentary. I wanted to let him know, you're right, Ron. They do have 2 fourth-round picks, and we did not make that clear last time around. They definitely got 2 fourth-rounders. We assume they'll get a third-rounder. And, so I wanted to give you credit for that. Beyond that, everybody else that commented, we appreciate it. We're going to stick to draft stuff because, that makes Zach happy. And what we're going to do is we're going to call this our way too early look at who the Steelers might actually be able to target with their second, third, and fourth round picks. We're going to stick to the second, third, and fourth round. They don't have a fifth rounder right now. And, there's just, as I said, it's way too early. And there's really almost no way for us to guess who's going to be there in the 6th and 7th rounds. So we're not even going to try. We're going to give our best guess at what we can do in the early rounds. And we're going to guesstimate that, their third round pick, if they get one for Le'Veon Bell, as a compensatory. Hey, I did the word right, man. Compensatory pick. Will be somewhere in the 90-ish range, late 90s, early 100s. So we're gonna try and include that in as well. And the format we're going to use is we're going to look at potentially offensive guys who may be available and defensive guys who may be available at that pick. And so, the Steelers' first pick comes in at what? I forget, 49, 50? I can't remember. 49. So that's second round. And what, 32, 27 picks down? Something like that. If I do bad math real quick off the fly. I looked in a bunch of different places. I ran some simulations, and while I'm pretty famous for saying that mock drafts are meaningless, you got to try and get some sense of who you think is going to be around at that time frame. Everybody knows we may as well do the offensive bit and get it out of the way. JK all day. I've said it. I've continued to say it. I'm going to continue to say it. Look, and for those who wanted Etienne, he's going back to school. Sorry, man. Didn't matter to me. My Ohio State bias shows JK all day. For those who are concerned that he has been a lot of mileage on him, it ain't as much as you think. The Ohio State running back split time, the last 3 years, and so JK has mileage, but it's not as much mileage as you think. I like Dobbins. I like his speed. I like the fact that he squats 7 billion pounds. He's got tree trunks for legs. He's got a lot of power, and he's a Buckeye. So, that's one guy. In every simulation I ran today, JK was there at 49. Now, I don't know that will actually be the truth. Right? It's very unlikely, in fact, in my opinion, that will be the truth. If he has a good combine, he may not be there, in the second round. And the fact, as you brought up when we were talking offline, that Etienne is going back to Clemson means, JK elevates a little bit within the draft capital. But I'm going to stick with it. If he's there, you take him. Now, who else might I take on the offensive side? For me, I really don't know. I'll tell you why. The interior offensive line is something I would look at, but there haven't been any guys there in my simulations, and so I don't see a lot of potential to be had there. There may be a tackle or two, like Prince Tega. I can't say. Why do I even try and say these names that I can't say? The guy named Prince, but he has more names than the ex guy named Prince. Tega Wana Goho, something like that. And I apologize to him that I can't say his name. But that's a guy. He's an offensive tackle, but again, he's like a project kind of offensive tackle, right? He hasn't played football for a lot of years, so he doesn't have a vast bit of experience, but he's got all the measurables. So maybe that's a guy that I would look at potentially as well. I know everybody's going to be screaming tight end, tight end, tight end, tight end, and there are guys going to be there like Cole Kmet, Hunter Bryant. Maybe Thaddeus Moss will certainly be there probably around that time. I just don't think it's worth taking Thaddeus Moss at that point. But maybe Cole Kmet. I don't know. I don't think Hunter Bryant is an inline tight end. I'm not sure any of these guys are. We've talked about it as a meh group, even though a lot of people like it a lot. But those, I can see it if there's not a good offensive lineman there. If JK's not there, there's not a wide receiver that is blowing their socks off. That seems like the best value to have there. I could see them maybe looking at tight end.
Yeah, no, I think that's fair. I'll get to the tight ends here in a second because I've made it kind of known my opinion on this class. I think if you're looking for a receiving tight end, you're going to find one. If you're looking for a guy that's going to be the next Travis Kelce, George Kittle, Zach Ertz, do everything at a top level, I think you're going to be disappointed unless one of these guys sneaks up in the middle of the draft, kind of like those guys did, because no one had Kittle at the top of their board, no one had Ertz at the top of their board, et cetera, et cetera. But I'll get to that in a moment. I honestly like a lot of the running backs in this class. I think it's a deep class at the position. I think there's a lot of top talent. I do like Dobbins. I like Swift. I like Jonathan Taylor. I will say Jonathan Taylor is the one that scares me the most because even though he's been moderately healthy, you can't deny the amount of touches that guy's gotten while he's been in Wisconsin. He's been the Wisconsin offense by and large for the better part of the last 3 years. So I'm hesitant to take him unless you're looking at just finding an exciting running back to work on a rookie contract and then go right back to the drawing board afterwards, because I can't imagine him continuing to pile up the touches and staying healthy for a long portion. He seems like a guy who will have a solid 8-year career until the wheels just fall off just because of wear and tear over the last 11 as a whole. But the one guy that if I had to pick one running back that I think fits, it might not fit what fans want, because I know fans have been open about, we want a scat back, we want a fast running back. The running back I think that fits the mold of what the Steelers do offensively the most that no one has talked about, and I don't know why, is Zach Moss out of Utah. I mean, he, in my mind, is a rich man's Benny Snell. I think he does a lot of the things that James Conner does extraordinarily well. His contact balance is fantastic. He has good vision to be able to cut real quick and hit it up there. He is a very above average receiver at this point. I don't think you have to work on him as much as a receiver as you do with James Conner, who didn't really show a lot in that capacity. I think he's better now. He's compact. He's 5'10", 225, give or take. I think he has the ability to kind of go and get in there in a short yard situation. He doesn't have tremendous long speed, but he isn't a slouch either in that capacity. I just think you look at what he brings as a leader, as an intelligent football player, as a high effort player. You have a running back that fits the mold of what the Steelers have traditionally looked for in a running back. And I think if he's sitting there, because I think the running backs board is going to be a lot of, I think Dobbins is the one that goes first. But I think it's going to be a flavor of what team, what's one type of back, because they're all kind of different. Dobbins is very much a well-rounded back. I think Swift is much more of his last name would indicate is a shiftier type of guy with some power to him. Taylor is a multifaceted kind of zone running back. Moss is the one guy I feel good about in a Steelers jersey. I wouldn't mind seeing him there. And he's the one guy that, unless he comes out and flat in all the testing thing, I think his tape is good. I think he's a guy that can be there at 49, and depending on what his stock is like, maybe he sneaks to the end of the third round because there's a lot of inconsistencies, but there's a lot of people that like him a lot, and he could go higher. So,
and he's a 4-year guy, right? So,
yeah.
But he has, like as you mentioned, people are going to talk about Jonathan Taylor. Jonathan Taylor has averaged over 300 carries a season for 3 years.
It's unbelievable. Yeah.
It's a ton, and so there is even though this is a 4-year guy, he actually has less mileage on him than Jonathan Taylor does. So that's an interesting choice, and he improved, pretty much each year. I think he got hurt one year, but I'm not positive. I can't remember.
Yeah, there was. I remember which year. There was a year that he got banged up a little bit, but by and large, his durability has been good, and he's seen enough touches to make you feel confident. Like, he's not at all at the mileage that Taylor is, but he has 700-800 touches over the course of his career, so that's enough to make you feel good about the production. He's averaged over 5 yards per carry in his career. For the type of back he is, I'll take that. And the one thing that stands out about me compared to a lot of young backs is when you watch him in pass protection, you don't feel like he's a liability. He's more than willing to put his nose up there. It's kind of how Benny Snell was whenever he was watching backs on back or during training camp and whatnot. I think Zach Moss will have that type of impact as a rookie no matter where he lands. I think you're going to feel confident about having him on passing downs because he is effective in space as a receiver for as big as he is. And he also is an effective pass blocker. I don't know why no one's talking about Zach Moss more. I know a lot of people have him in their top 10 running back rankings, myself included. But I think he could easily sneak up above a guy like Cam Akers out of Florida State, depending on how nervous you are about Jonathan Taylor's wear and tear. I think you have to be hard-pressed to at least look at him. I think he just fits the mold of what the Steelers do. The interior offensive line is another spot I think they could go, and that's actually the spot that if I had to take a shot in the dark, depending on what happens with Bud Dupree, I think they'd be hard-pressed not to. And the one guy I know I've mentioned in the back channels numerous times who is my top interior offensive lineman in this class is Creed Humphrey out of Oklahoma. I have an affectionate place in my heart for offensive linemen that are former wrestlers, just like a lot of these Midwestern boys are. And you just watch Humphrey. He has that kind of demeanor that you want. I mean, he's very quick with his snap. He gets the ball off. He's engaged with the defensive lineman in front of him. He doesn't have tremendous length. Even though he's 6'5", he doesn't have tremendous length. Which is why I think he's better fit for a center guard, but which is where he spent his time at Oklahoma. So you're going to see some knock with his overall lack of arm length, but he's compact, he's strong, he's firm. Even though he's 6'5", he has a lot of tremendous leverage under defensive linemen, and he has good vision. So I think his ability to move is going to be something that would be appealing to the Steelers because of how much they like to pull guys like Marquise Pouncey. I don't think he's as athletic as Marquise Pouncey, but he is a quick mover. I just think he has that demeanor of an offensive lineman you want. He's gritty, he's hardworking, he's smart. He's a guy that if they picked at 49, I know it's not the sexy pick at all, and it's a pick for the future. But when Marquise Pouncey ultimately retires, and then you have your next center on your roster for the next 15 years, I don't think anyone's going to be complaining about that. So he's the one pick that if I had to choose an offensive lineman, he's about the only guy at 49 that I would actually feel comfortable with moving. And I know I mentioned this to you offline, but the one position I don't think fans would be happy with, but if the board falls a certain way, especially when you look at some of the early simulations of things going, I wouldn't be surprised to see receiver be an option with how deep this class is.
Yep.
I know fans aren't going to like hearing that because it's not at all the need. You still have Juju back for one more year, or more. Deontay Johnson and James Washington are still young enough on their contract. Deon Cain kind of started coming along as the year went along. Switzer, like him or not, is still on the roster. So I think realistically, receiver is a luxury pick, but Juju's future is in doubt. You can like Johnson all you want to, but you're going to automatically throw all this stuff on his plate and make him be a number one receiver in this short order. Like it's a lot. I think they could add depth there. This is going to be a potentially historically deep receiver class. I think you have to consider if a guy that you love jumps off the page at you at receiver and is sitting there at 49, and there's nothing else you like from a value perspective, you have to make your team better. You can't just go and reach for need. You have to find guys that are going to improve the abilities of your team. And if you're trying to really maximize Ben's window, you can't tell me that you wouldn't like the idea of potentially adding another weapon to his arsenal to go with Juju, to go with Deontay Johnson, to go with Washington. And I'm not even going to bother naming a receiver in this scenario because if you pick a receiver type that you like, you're going to find it in this class. There's so many different guys, and there's guys that are going to fall through the cracks. But they'll be there. There'll be plenty of guys there. But I think that's something to look out for. I think you can't understate the ability for the Steelers to find receiver threats that do well. They draft a receiver virtually every year. I think under Kevin Colbert, there's 3 or 4 drafts they haven't taken a receiver. Every other year they have, no matter how deep they've been in the position. I don't think this year's the exception, especially when you consider the talent there. So that's something to look out for. But Moving on to the tight ends, this is my last potential look-see. I'm not high on this tight end class. It's not that I don't think they can be productive NFL players. I'm not high on them because I don't think the type of tight end the Steelers have shown a penchant for liking is in this draft class. If you're looking for an Evan Ingram type, if you're looking for a receiving threat that can split the seam and make electrifying catches downfield, but is going to offer you moderately average inline blocking ability, I think you're going to be disappointed with a lot of the top guys. I don't view Bryson Hopkins as an inline blocker. I don't view Hunter Bryant as an inline blocker. I don't view Jared Pinkney as an inline blocker. That's my opinion. They show effort. I think they show a lot of effort there, but in today's game, it's so hard to get these tight ends up to snuff when it comes to inline blocking because the college landscape for offenses, you don't see a lot of pro-style offenses that utilize tight ends like LSU did with Thaddeus Moss, who, as long as you like him, he's not going to 49. I'm sorry to break it to fans that are enamored with Moss. He's not going 49. But I'll eat those words if I'm wrong, but I don't see it right now. But the way the Steelers still enjoy pro-style tight ends. That's why they like Vance McDonald. That's why they like Xavier Grimble, whether even the fans didn't like him. That's why they like Jesse James, because they're guys that have blocking abilities and can be receivers, kind of like Heath Miller, those type of players. And you don't see those very often. When you do, you snatch them up. That's why guys like Travis Kelce were lauded. George Kittle, I don't think George Kittle was that great of a blocker. I think that's why he stumbled, because he's not an elite athlete. And he wasn't the best blocker, but you saw enough traits to think that this could be a well-rounded guy. I don't get that vibe from a lot of the top tight ends in this class. I think they're electrifying, exciting, and fun to watch. But for the way the Steelers utilize their tight ends, especially the fans that want to cut Vance McDonald, you need a blocking tight end with the way the Steelers do their business. And if you think Zach Gentry is that guy, you haven't been paying attention very closely. And while I like Christian Scotland Williamson, you have no idea what he's going to be at this point. So you can't put all your eggs in that basket and then throw an athletic, below-average blocking tight end into the mix just because he's a very exciting receiver. You already have exciting receiving options on your team. And while it'd be a different dynamic, the Steelers utilize blocking in their tight ends too much. So I don't know which tight end I'm taking at this point. I'd imagine them taking a tight end to put behind McDonald with Gentry and kind of have him develop. I don't think McDonald's going anywhere as much as fans want him to go someplace, which is why I don't think tight end is going to ultimately end up being as pressing of a need as you think it is, especially if they can work out a deal with retaining Vannett. If they can retain Nick Vannett, I don't think they draft a tight end, period. Yeah. That's just my opinion. But
now let me ask you about Moss, just so I'm clear. Are you saying Moss will be available at 49, but they should not take him there, or he will be gone by then?
I think he'll be available, but I don't think they should take him at 49.
That I agree with that statement. I think he'll be there. I think if he manages to slide down to them in the third to jump ahead to that pick, then you got it, because that's a good. To me, he's the best inline blocker in this group.
He still offers you something in the receiving game.
Yes,
that's the key. Yeah.
So that's a potential, but again, I just don't see him at 49. It doesn't make sense to me.
No, he's a guy. I like well-rounded tight ends that you can leave him on the field all three downs. You don't have to pull him and put your backup tight end in who's only a blocker, because then it tips the hat to the defense. Oh, we're blocking because we're not going to throw the ball to our 6'2", 260-pound glorified fullback. So I think that kind of tips the hat there. Moss is not elite at any one thing, but he's very well-rounded. He offers a lot of upside. I just don't think he's going to go as high as people think he is, because he doesn't have elite traits like Hopkins does, Bryant does, Pinkney does, Kmet does. So I think he'll be there in the third round, which would be a very good landing spot for him, in my opinion. All
right. So that's what we look at on the offensive side for that first pick in the second round. What about on the defense? Since I started the offense side, I'll let you start the defensive side.
I think a lot of what the Steelers end up doing on defense is going to come down to what can they do with Bud Dupree. Because if they don't get a deal done with Dupree, whether it's the franchise tag or not, you can't deny that edge, in my opinion, becomes the highest need, because like
Absolutely.
We said in the podcast, you have no idea what you're getting with Skipper as a starter. Ola has flashed, and he's a nice depth player right now, but I can't trust all my eggs in that basket with this defense, with the way that it currently is, to expect him to come in there and produce the same way that Bud Dupree did. I do think a big part of why Dupree exploded the way he did this year is, one, it was a contract year. That's the easy answer. But two, the thing that no one talks about is the fact that you can say what you want about Keith Butler. He is a very good position coach, and you can't discount what he did as an outside linebackers coach for the Steelers when they had Joey Porter, Lamar Woodley, James Harrison, Jason Werlitz before he abruptly retired. You can't discount that. And Bud Dupree had never worked with Butler in that capacity because he had Joey Porter as his position coach until the Steelers ultimately fired Porter, or let him walk into the sunset. And then, Butler came back, and I don't think that's coincidental. I think Butler's track record as an outside linebackers coach shows that he can bring the best out of players, and Dupree was a first-round talent. You can't go back and be a revisionist and say he wasn't because he took so long to develop. He was a first-round talent. It was just a matter of getting to that point. So maybe he brings that out in Ola, maybe he doesn't. I'm not holding my breath, and I don't think you can count on that. So I think if Dupree walks, you have to entertain the idea of taking an edge rusher early in the draft. It's always tough to figure out how these guys are going to fit because these defenses are so multi-schematic now. One guy, and I think 49 is early for him, but I think the Steelers would entertain it. I think he, in my opinion, is a very similar prospect in a lot of ways to TJ Watt, other than the fact that they both played at Wisconsin. But Zach Bond is a guy that I like a lot. He's older. He's a redshirt senior, but I think you look at what he does. He has an explosive first step. He knows how to use his hands and his legs very well. He doesn't have the elite length that TJ Watt had, but he knows how to use the length that he does have, if that makes sense. So I think he's a guy that could sneak in there. I think he's more of a third or fourth round prospect. I think he could actually end up being in the third round. But I think with the Steelers' interest in guys like Watt and seeing what Bond was able to do there, I think realistically you have to take an idea for him. He just fits that hard-working lunch bucket edge rusher who is going to give his all every play. He's explosive when he needs to be. He gets upfield in a hurry. His pass rush is very developed, which it should be for a redshirt senior. So I think he's a guy that could get there. He needs to add some weight because he's not that big in the frame. But quite frankly, I don't think TJ Watt was that big in the frame either. That's just I think Watt has grown into his frame, being in the league now for 3 years. But I like him a lot. I think he has a very high ceiling, especially if he kind of takes that Watt progression. And I think he could be a very nice compliment to him. He's, again, another guy that doesn't get all the same pomp and circumstances, a guy like Chase Young, obviously, and all those top tier players. But I think he's a guy that on day two, if he's sitting there and you like him a lot and you don't re-sign Dupree, I think he gives competition to a guy like Ola or Chicolo, depending on if they retain Chicolo early on in the season. I think he develops into a starter no matter what team he goes to. I think he's that type of high effort player that has enough pedigree and enough traits to kind of work off of to go through there. So beyond the edge, though, I think any pick you take is going to be a luxury pick. I know a lot of fans are going to want to see an interior defensive lineman picked to replace Javon Hargrave, who is the one free agent I think we can all agree is pretty much out the door. Not because of the Steelers don't want him, but you're not going to pay him that money. I just think you look at the way the Steelers use their defensive linemen. You obviously want to draft someone for insurance. I think they do draft somebody, but I don't think it's going to be as early as fans think it is. You're not going to draft a guy in the third round just to have him sit behind Tuitt and Hargrave. I'm sorry, Tuitt and Hayward, excuse me. You're not going to have him sit behind Alualu, who, newsflash, the Steelers aren't going to bench for a rookie. And I think Isaiah Buggs, he doesn't get a lot of credit, but I think he came on and showed nice progression for this year. So I don't see them going defensive line early in this draft like a lot of fans want them to. And McCullers, for all intents and purposes, I don't think was bad last year. I think he's finally coming along with the adaptation of Carl Dunbar's coaching style, being much more of a teacher and less of a authoritarian. And not that John Mitchell is a bad coach. John Mitchell's an all-world defensive line coach, but some coaching styles just work better for different players. And I think we're seeing that for McCullers because when he had the opportunity to play, he did have decently. So for a depth guy, with how much they use a lot of two down lineman sets, I don't think you have to draft a lineman early just because you think there's a risk that someone like Tuitt or Hayward might get hurt, because you can't do that. And both of them are going to, like, Tuitt's under contract under how many years, and Hayward's more than likely going to be re-signed as his contract expires. So there's really no glaring need right now. Beyond that, I think any pick you go on defense is for depth and luxury. You can make the argument that they can draft the safety for depth behind Edmonds and Minkah Fitzpatrick. You make an argument that with Artie Burns leaving and, some of their other guys, potentially Mike Hilton leaving and Cam Sutton going into a contract year, cornerback could be a target. But you forget that Justin Lane, they just drafted last year. He's still around. So I don't know which way they're going to go. They go defense, but you can't. Regardless, edge should be the highest priority for them, because they need improved depth in that area. They want to, even if they end up re-signing Dupree, because Chicolo is not a long-term depth piece. You still don't know what you have with Ola, and no one knows, as much as he was a fan favorite, Skipper is still Skipper. You don't know what you have in him quite yet.
I agree with everything you said. I like Bond as well. I think he's a potential target. Another guy I was looking at because his name kept popping up during these lovely simulations was Highsmith, the kid from Charlotte. But I haven't watched enough to know whether I like that pick or don't. And then, I thought about it. Like, I don't want to argue out of that position, because I agree with you in the sense that I don't think there is a desperate need. You're certainly not going to draft. I mean, unless you're talking about, somebody falling that is, just, a first-round talent that somehow slips down here into the late second round. I don't see them pulling the trigger on a cornerback, on a safety, or a linebacker. And, edge is iffy in the sense of if they can get Dupree in for another year, either through the tag or through a long-term deal, then I don't think edge becomes an issue. And I know one of our commentators did say that they have concerns that Dupree becomes Lamar Woodley after he gets paid. I just don't think that will happen. Bud hasn't shown that kind of tendency.
Woodley was heading down that route, in my opinion, before he signed that deal.
I agree.
Yeah.
So I don't believe that will happen, but I'm also fine with it, being a cap or a tag, and having it, say, okay, you did it 2 years in a row, and then seeing if they can go beyond that. But there's another kid, and because it just feels good to me. Is a kid named Ladarius Hamilton, who plays for North Texas. And we all know who the last guy we drafted from North Texas was, right? Being Joe Green.
We should know.
And if you don't know, shame on you. Go listen to a Ravens podcast. No, don't. You're still welcome here. And he's a senior. He is. It probably is too early to take him at 49. But I like this kid. He's probably more a defensive end, like, not a Steelers type defensive end. But the way they've been allowing guys like Cam Hayward and Stephon Tuitt to play, again, this is a draft for the future. Not in this sense. This is a pick for the future, which is, if Cam Hayward suddenly, knock on wood, please don't let this happen, falls off a cliff, or Tuitt continues being injured or injury prone. They would suddenly have a need at the defensive end or defensive tackle position, and maybe this is a kid who could help out there. He's a little light. He'd need to put on some weight. I don't know that he could transition from DN to an outside linebacker and become a true edge guy or not, but I don't know. It just feels good to me, so I brought him up.
He's definitely a late round guy, in my opinion. I think he's firmly a day 3, probably free agent. But, guys ascend randomly, and I'm sure if Joe Green likes them, we've seen these guys pound their fists on the table for these small school guys, and a lot of them that are alumni. And you don't see a whole lot of North Texas guys come in the league and setting the world on fire. So you never know if Joe Green has his voice in the ears of Kevin Colbert and Mike Tomlin that convince him to pull the trigger on day 3 if they find a hole for him. So,
yep. All right, so that now we're gonna move to the third round, and in the third round, we're totally guessing at where the Steelers are going to pick, because it's going to be a compensatory pick. We don't know what it's going to be. It probably will be a fairly high one. But I just don't know. And as you look at the third round and who may or may not be around, there's a lot of things that fall off, and we'll start on the defensive side here because I think we both agree that it's more than likely they go offense in the first round, unless Dupree is not retained, which that's just a different situation and creates a gaping hole in the defense. So we'll start with the defensive side in this third round. And again, I'm going to look on the sense of that even if they retain Dupree, that's the area that I think they would need the most depth. I think Chicolo is a potential cap casualty. And while, yes, as we've talked, you've got Skipper, you've got, Ola. I think there is a potential that this is where they could go and pull an edge guy. Again, I still don't know that there's another desperate need on defense. But, maybe it's edge. It may be somebody and I don't know enough about these guys to talk it in depth right now, I will be honest. But a guy like Anthony Jennings could be around. He's from Alabama. Maybe there's Alton Robinson from Syracuse could be there. They'll probably go before this, maybe, but they could show up if they drop a little bit. We'll have to wait and see. But I don't know. The other option here for me again would probably be if they felt like they needed depth in the defensive line. But to be honest, as a guy, Jordan Elliott from Missouri, I don't know anything about him. I just kept seeing his name pop up, so I don't know whether he's a good fit or not. But there just wasn't a lot there when I would look. So I'm leaning towards edge here if they go defense at that round. What do you got?
Yeah, I think, again, like I said before, I think edge you have to address edge. I think if one defensive need, if you could pick one player, regardless if you retain Dupree or not, even if it's on just a 1-year franchise tag, edge has to be the look. I mean, your outside linebacker depth, with or without Dupree, is still questionable because you have 2 undrafted free agents who have minimal to no varsity, quote unquote, as Tom would say, experience, and then you have a guy like Chicolo, who I do agree, if you're looking for one cap casualty, he makes the most sense based on his production output compared to what you're paying him. Not that he's a bad depth player. I do like Chicolo more than some people. I don't love him. I think he makes a lot of questionable mistakes with his eyes that get him into trouble and allow big plays to go, especially in the run defense. But you're going to a situation where if you do cut Chicolo as a cap casualty, and you only get Dupree on a 1-year deal or don't re-sign him, you have to go edge no matter what. I think there's always going to be edge defenders that are there in the middle of the rounds, but they're never really premium. So you kind of know if you're drafting a guy in the 3rd and 4th round, he's not necessarily going to come out and just set the world on fire. So I think you're looking for guys at that point in the draft that are trait-based, where you see enough of their athletic profile and you see enough with what they can bring and offer in that capacity. And I think that being said, there's some guys that fit those molds. I think realistically, you have a guy like Jonathan Greenard from Florida. I mean, he's older. Again, he's another redshirt senior. But I think he has a nice athletic profile for guys' size. He's a stand-up athlete. He has good bursts, and I think he does well even when he's sitting back and pinning his ears back. I think he gets off the ball well, and I think he knows how to utilize a pass rushing tool set, which again I like to see from guys that are redshirt seniors, because at that point you should have developed some level of a pass rush, not just one move here and one move there. You should know timing. You should have a better feel for athletic abilities, especially if you're going to be a draftable prospect. So he's just one random prospect that I think would be interesting to look at. A lot of the mid-round, I don't waste a lot of time looking at mid-round edge rushers, if I'm going to be honest with you. I do just for fun. That's the one position I feel like when you're drafting a middle-round edge rusher, you know what you're getting. 9 times out of 10, he's going to be a depth piece or a roster casualty in year 1 or year 2. It's just the reality of the position. The top tier ones that are worth anything are the ones that go early. I'm not saying you can't find guys like James Harrison. I'm not saying that, but odds are you're not going to find that guy 9 times out of 10. And even then, it took James Harrison how long to become the player that we knew him as and loved him as in the 2000s. But Greenard is one guy I think realistically that you could look at. He's a Florida guy. Steelers have shown a love for their SEC Florida football. So, it's just a potential look there. I would say at this point in the draft, it wouldn't be a bad opportunity to look for like a depth safety because there are some guys there. I don't. Fans are going to want them to take a safety because I know Davis is more than likely gone. Marcus Allen is not a free safety at all. You really don't have any true free safety guy on your roster except for Minka Fitzpatrick. So God forbid that something happens to him, he gets hurt. Knock on wood, it doesn't happen. But freak accidents do happen to players, and you need to have some sort of contingency plan. So I think that could be a very good range for them to look at. I don't know realistically who you could go for at that point in time because a lot of these safeties now are becoming multi-dimensional guys where a lot of them are better in the back end. Some of them are worse in the back end. And I admittedly haven't dug deep into the safety class because the second the Steelers went from needing a safety to having Minka Fitzpatrick, you'll excuse me if my interest in the class kind of diminished from a Steelers perspective. So I don't know a lot of names at this point in the safety class. I'm not going to lie in that regard because I don't think it's a huge need. I think you can find where you would be drafting a safety, I think you can find a very cheap bargain bin, stereotypical Steelers free agent signing safety depth piece to put behind Minka Fitzpatrick. I mean, they had that in Cam Kelly, like it or not. And that's the average going rate for a backup safety because backup safeties are that. They know they're not starters. If you think you can start in this league as a safety, you're going to follow the money, and the Steelers aren't going to do that. So I don't think safety is a big need, especially early on. You're not going to draft a safety in the third round who's never going to take snaps away from Fitzpatrick. And whether you like him or not, fans, Terrell Edmunds is not going anywhere. He is there. He is their starting strong safety. He's not going anywhere. I'm just going to say that there. You can do all you want to and say all you want to about him. But I remember a specific Bud Dupree who fans wanted to get rid of after 2 years in the league. He wasn't doing anything. And now we're willing to throw the Brinks truck at him. So whatever. He's not going anywhere. So I can't justify drafting a safety in the third round to sit behind your 2 first-round safeties who aren't going anywhere for the next 2 years minimum. So that's why I haven't wasted my time looking at safeties. I think they're more likely looking at free agent. And even though I think cornerback could be a luxury pick, they don't really need to go cornerback. I mean, you just drafted Justin Lane in the third round last year, and I think they still like enough from him to consider him an outside guy. Cam Sutton's played in the slot in the nickel packages, so if Hilton does walk, you still have him. And I don't imagine them drafting one. You have Nelson and Hayden locked up. You have Justin Lane locked up. Artie Burns leaves, whatever. So I think that's not a need. And linebacker is the one. If there's one position this year, I don't think they look at, but they don't even draft is linebacker. I mean, you have Devin Bush, and I know we've had these conversations. Joe's done a lot of work on Mark Barham. I agree. I don't think fans can want him to be gone, and his errors stand out immensely compared to his mistakes or compared to his good plays. Mark Barron made good plays last year.
Yes, he did.
It's just the fact that no one wants to talk about those ones because the mistakes he made were glaring, and the plays he made a mistake on came off as a lack of effort. And for me, I don't like that. But the amount of snaps the guy played, as Joe has pointed out numerous times in numerous platforms, the amount of snaps he played and the fact that the Steelers were still so willing to go back to him, knowing they had Vince Williams on the roster, shows that they have faith in him. This isn't a situation where it's like John Bostic or the guy from the Steven Johnson. It's not one of those cases where they're playing him because they have to play him. The Steelers have options, and they still chose to go with Barron because he does offer them some flexibility in their packages that they like to use. He's still under contract. He's not going anywhere. I know fans will want him to be gone. I genuinely will be surprised, and I'll admit if I'm wrong, but I'd be surprised if he's a cap casualty. I think if anything, the Steelers might try to extend him a year or two to kind of dissipate some of that contract money so he doesn't make as much of an impact this year. But when you mix Devin Bush, Mark Barron, Vince Williams, and the Steelers are high on Ulysses Gilbert, I don't think they need to draft a linebacker. They might sign one after the fact, but that's the one position on the roster I feel pretty good about depth-wise. So I don't think, again, I think it's an offensive-heavy draft at this point too. So I'm not going anywhere here with defense.
Yeah, there is one other defensive guy I would consider, and as you said, it's a luxury pick because they did draft a corner last year. But Darnay Holmes, the cornerback from UCLA, he's a smaller guy, but I think he's got a lot of athleticism. I think he's got a lot of natural traits. He's very reactive, and he shows up in the run game. So, if he were there, at that point, I actually had him in my list for the first pick in the 4th round. But it feels like that's a stretch, right? Like he would be gone before then. So if he were there and there was no better option, then that's a defensive guy I might look at in Holmes. But if we flip over to the offensive side for this pick in the 3rd round, that's when I'm just going to be I'm O-line porn all the way. Because there's a couple guys that I looked at, both who they're both SEC guys, and we don't do a lot of SEC stuff, with the Steelers. But these are 2 SEC guys. One of them played in the national championship game. The other one is from Georgia. The 2 guys that I looked at are Solomon Kinley and Lloyd Cushenberry. I like both of them. I think they're developmental. I don't think they're starter ready right now, but I think they're guys that you were talking about. The center, potentially the guy. I forgot his name already. Creed. Yeah, and how could I forget that name? It's Rocky. It's Creed. Come on, that's a great name. We want him because he's a Rocky guy. But you're talking about the athleticism and so on for him, or his ability to play center. I like Cushenberry for the same reason. He's got athletic traits. I just think he needs to develop them more. Again, these are guys that don't have a lot of experience, but I'm okay with that when you're talking about it in the third round. Both of them are interior guys. I don't think either one of them is going to push outside. I think that Cushenberry could have some position flexibility, maybe at guard, certainly at center, and maybe the same is true of Kinley. I don't know, but I think you bring them in here with Surratt and the group that we have, and you've got some guys for the future potentially. And beyond that, I just don't know. I mean, again, you could probably say wide receiver in any one of these picks. You know what I mean? But who's the wide receiver that's going to be there? I don't even want to guess. I just don't know. But that's where I'd look at this point for offensive side. And I know that there's a chance neither one of those guys is there. There is one other, and I forgot all about him, and shame on me, my Scarlet and Gray is going to get nailed because there was you said there's no way they draft a linebacker, and while I agree with you, there's no way they draft a linebacker. If Malik Harrison is there, and they run out of options, Vince Williams has been around for a long time, and. Not that I don't love Vince Williams. I do. And I think he's been a tremendous player for the Steelers. But, again, if we're drafting for the future, how long is Vince Williams going to play? And Malik Harrison is a thumper. There's a guy who can maybe take that Vince Williams role. So, I know we were supposed to be offense, but I can't forget Malik Harrison. So, all right, you go offense.
All right, so I actually have to backtrack here because in my moment of gushing over Creed Humphrey, I realized that he is going back to Oklahoma. I missed that news evidently along the way. So I will get roasted in the comment section, I'm sure, but don't care because Creed Humphrey will be the top interior offensive lineman in next year's class. That's fine. I do agree, though, if they don't go offensive line, I don't envision a situation where they don't at least entertain the idea of taking a lineman early on. I talked about in the last podcast, you have to look at their depth, the future prospects for the current contract situation. Some of these guys not knowing what you're going to be doing with Ramon Foster, with BJ Finney. You don't really know if you can trust Zach Banner or Chukuma Okorafor as your right tackle, while I think they're both good offensive linemen. You don't know. And Matt Filer, I don't think goes anywhere, but maybe he's a guard, maybe he's a tackle next year. Villanueva's in a contract situation after this upcoming season. De Castro, I don't think goes anywhere, but he's going to be a free agent in a couple years. Pouncey's getting up there. You can't neglect the position and by just selecting undrafted free agents and late round picks and expecting it to always be as pretty as it's been in recent years with guys like Ramon Foster and Villanueva as undrafted guys. One guy that I think if they would go after this type of player, which I don't know they would because of the risk with his injury history, Trey Adams is a guy that I've liked for a while. I think he has all the markers you want. I mean, he's a massive human being. He's 6'8". He reminds me a lot of Villanueva to an extent. He does very well in his pass sets. For a guy his size, he uses his length to his advantage. He doesn't always have great leverage, but he does do well to get out in space and kind of get down in there. He anchors pretty well, which I like for a guy his size. I just sometimes get concerned about linemen that big because you get some of these smaller edge rushers like a James Harrison type who gets underneath you easily. That's tough, and we've seen Villanueva struggle with that at times too. But he reminds me a lot of Villanueva from a lot of his fundamental smoothness, from getting back in his sets, using 45-degree angles to really set the mark. He doesn't seem to get fooled by a lot of pass rushers coming at him, but he's a huge red flag because you have no idea how he's going to hold up in the league because of all of the injuries that he's had, and they're not minor injuries either. So, but I like him a lot. I think he could be a potential target if they go tackle. There's always going to be players there that are going to be potential interior guys because I would prefer to go interior if I was taking an offensive lineman. Again, no, it's not as sexy, but I think it's there. The one guy that I like a lot because I have an affinity for Big 12 or Big 10 and Midwestern linemen, Taylor Biadasz. I think that's how I pronounce his name. I've never known. I've watched him for a while. I've never bothered to look. But I like Wisconsin linemen. He's a tough guy. He has flexibility, I think, to play center or guard in the league. I think what's going to help the Steelers is that he looked like a surefire first-round pick in 2017 and 2018, and I think he kind of didn't look as hot this year, which I think will knock him down a bit, depending on how much stock scouts put on his 2019 performance. But I think that realistically he's a scheme-versatile lineman, which is not something you can always say about Wisconsin linemen because a lot of times they're just power-run guys. I think he fits very well, and that realistically, if the Steelers can pull out of him and you give him a mentor like Marquise Pouncey, David Castro, I think that's going to get the most out of him. I think he can be a guy that I think we can look at him potentially down the road as a starter. You have to look at 2019. I think you can't bypass that for his previous film because it was kind of alarming how Wisconsin's offensive line still did so well, but he made some kind of questionable mistakes. But the guy's he's going to bust his butt every play. He's going to go and give 100% effort. He's a stereotypical Wisconsin lineman, and I think that's going to bode well for him in the league. And he's a guy that I would not be mad at all selecting at that point. I do think he stumbles a little bit. I think he should be there end of the third round because of his 2019 film. Receiver, again, receiver could be a second-round pick, third-round pick, fourth-round pick, undrafted free agent. With this deep of a class, you can't ignore the position. The Steelers are always looking to restock, especially because you don't know if Juju is going to be in a Steelers jersey in 2021. So you have to prepare accordingly for that, and you can't just bypass it. While I like Johnson, I like Washington, you still need to add bodies. So I would be interested to see if he goes at that point. One name that I mentioned today on Twitter, I'm going to mention again today, I think would be an interesting replacement for Juju if he does walk, would be Chase Claypool out of Notre Dame. I'm not just saying this because of my recent bias towards him, but I liked Miles Boykin last year out of Notre Dame. And when you're watching Boykin, Claypool had the opportunity to kind of pop in some opportunities he was given. And I think for a guy who's his size, he's a big dude. He's 6'4", 230. And he moves very well for a guy that size. And he's physical. He knows how to use his body well. Great hands, great length. I don't think he's going to wow you necessarily with his speed, but he is a good mover. And for a guy, because big guys, there was the biggest criticism with DK Metcalf last year was he could only run go routes, he could only run streaks, he could only run, posts. I think a guy like Claypool, for a man his size, he does very well with moving on intermediate routes across the center of the field, which is not something you can always say about big receiving threat. The Steelers have stayed away from guys like him in the past, which is why I'm saying I would want him, but I don't think the Steelers would necessarily go after him. But there were indication today from him that the Steelers were meeting with him, which I think is at least a step in the right direction while they're at the Senior Bowl. So we'll see. I think he would be a nice addition. I think he's an outside receiver, but I think if he can improve on the interior, I think he could potentially be a slot guy in the same way that Juju did. Just needs more experience in that capacity because Notre Dame didn't exactly know how to use him to the best of their ability, which is a big knock on Miles Boykin as well. But he's one third, fourth round receiver I wouldn't mind going after. And then beyond that, again, I'm sticking with my guns with tight end. If Thaddeus Moss is there, this is a spot I would like taking him.
Yep.
In the third round. I think that's good value for him, in my opinion, because I don't think that I think he's good. I think he's a top 5, top 6 tight end. I don't think he has any elite traits that really jump out to the point where, like, I need to take this guy. I think his best trait, if you had to put one, is probably his blocking, just when you compare him to the other guys. I don't think he's a smooth mover necessarily. I think he has very good hands. He knows how to contort his body in certain ways to make very good contested catches. I think that's the type of guy the Steelers like, a guy who can throw the ball down, check him down to it. He can move the chains. He has the opportunity to bust something open. And the Steelers love pedigree. They love pedigree. And if you don't know at this point, you haven't been paying attention over the last month, Thaddeus Moss is the son of Randy Moss, another pedigree Hall of Fame receiver. The Steelers love that stuff. They love guys that have NFL connections. Thaddeus Moss fits that mold. And he's one guy I know the fans, including our very own Eric, have been disgruntled with them passing up on the darling tight ends. But I would say if there was one tight end that I think the Steelers wouldn't pass up on because of what he brings to the game right now, because of his roots, it would be Thaddeus Moss. But he's not explosive. He doesn't do anything at a truly elite level, but he's just very well-rounded. And I don't really know how much they need one of these big pass rushers. He does very well in the intermediates or the middle of the field to move the chains. That's all the Steelers ever asked for their tight ends. You can sit there and want an athletic tight end all you want to. That's just not what the Steelers do. I'm not saying you're wrong, but you're not right. So I just, you can love these athletic Evan Ingram type tight ends. I almost said receivers because that's what they are. They're big receivers.
Yep.
You can love them all you want to. That's not what the Steelers' MO is. Thaddeus Moss is about as close to the Steelers type of tight end as you're going to see in this class, and why I think the Steelers will look long and hard. Same reason why they like Foster Moreau. The Tigers of LSU run a pro-style type offense. That's why Joe Burrow is so highly sought after, because he's a pro-style quarterback. That's why they're offensive linemen. That's why the Steelers went after a guy like Gerald Hawkins, because they're pro-style offensive linemen that are scheme versatile. A guy like Thaddeus Moss, they showed interest in Foster Moreau last year. Foster Moreau is a very similar type of receiver or tight end. So I think Thaddeus Moss fits that mold, and I think the Steelers would have drafted Moreau had he not been snagged up a couple picks before by the Raiders, and they ultimately went with Zach Gentry. I think they don't make that mistake twice. I think this would be a spot for them to go Moss if available. And that's really all I see them going. I think if they missed a running back early, I don't envision them taking one. I think they're happy with Benny Snell. I think they're happy with the other guys on the roster, and I think they're going to continue to pound the rock with Connor until the wheels fall off and he no longer is a Steeler, because I don't envision them re-signing him. So that's the one reason why, unless one of these guys like Dobbins falls, or my guy Zach Moss, I don't envision them taking running back, especially at this point if you miss out on one early. So I would say if you're going offense, it's going to be tight end, it's going to be line, and maybe a receiver. But that's my shtick.
And I'm with you 100% there. And in fact, you stole my thunder with Claypool, which is fine because you tweeted him out. He was going to be my fourth round guy at 114. The other, I'm stuck in, we may as well just continue this trend. And here, we're just going to look at both of these picks in the fourth round because they're only 11 picks apart. They've got 114 and 125. So you're talking really about the same groups of guys. When you're talking about a spread of 11 guys, the people who are going to be available that you're likely to look at are going to fall in that same range. And so I kind of stuck to the same theory. I mean, my theory remains the same as yours. It's offensive line, it's tight end, it's wide receiver. Once we get past the second round, and that's the only place I'm pulling my trigger on a running back, and it's only if a guy who is a potential first rounder happened to slide down there, right? Yeah. Like Dobbins or as you said, with Moss. Is that another Moss?
Zach Moss? No, it's not the same.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I knew it wasn't related Moss, but it's just Moss.
It is Moss. Yeah, there you
go. I also have Thaddeus Moss at this point, and I wouldn't be at all adverse to them taking him, in the third with that compensatory pick. But anywhere from that range to any of these fourth round picks, if he's around and the Steelers pass on him, I will be screaming about it because I don't think they should. And you make the excellent point that he is as close as you can get to the prototypical Steelers tight end, a guy that fits in their mold, a guy who can, do the inline blocking that they need him to do, and a guy who can, at times be that safety net for the quarterback. And I think Moss can definitely do that. When we start looking at the fourth round, look, if there's going to be guys there on the offensive side of the ball, in my view, if it's not receiver or interior offensive lineman or a tackle, so that, again, unless a player falls to them on the defensive side of the ball, I just don't know that I see them going in that direction. Their needs are on the offensive side of the ball right now. The defense is fairly young. I could see late fourth round again going depth on a defensive line, maybe even linebacker, guys to fill in special teams needs for a while. But let's stick with these fourth rounds pick. The guys that I looked at, and I don't know what you think of this guy. This is another interior offensive lineman, and it makes me ill to say this because he's another guy from that school up north. That's Ben Bredesen. I don't know if I'm saying his name right or not. He was a guy that I liked. I thought, probably doesn't have the same kind of versatility as the other two guys I was talking about in the third. I don't know that he can play center, but I think he's a guard more than anything else at the next level. But I still think he can be a quality guard at the next level and give them some depth there. And maybe a guy they can groom to be a Ramon Foster type. The other on the receiving side of the ball, Michael Pittman, the guy from USC. Why not? He was in the news because he was talking about how he's going to make people eat their words at the combine. So many people have said that. So, I'll wait until he does it. But, look, it's he's a top tier school guy at USC. I think this is a good position for him. I had Chase Claypool in here. I like him the most for the very reasons you talk about. A big bodied slot guy, somebody similar to what they had, and I won't remember his name. He went to the Panthers. What was his name? Steelers had him for a couple years. He started with the Jets. He went to the Panthers.
Jericho Cotchery.
Yeah, Jericho. How could I forget Jericho Cotchery? Similar to that mold, right? A big-bodied guy who's going to be a huge red zone threat out of the slot. How do you even cover him? I love the idea of them taking Chase Claypool for that very reason. And then if I'm going to throw a defensive guy out in this group. Right. One of the other offensive receivers would be Isaiah Hodges from Oregon State. Yeah. He was in my wheelhouse for this period of time. But again, my Ohio State bias is going to show up. If I'm going to take a developmental or a defensive guy, maybe Jordan Fuller at safety. Maybe now is when I'll take. I'll call him the Dangerfield replacement at this point. Bring in Jordan Fuller and make him play special teams. And not that I don't like Jordan Dangerfield and haven't appreciated what he's brought to the team as a key special teams guy, but he's been around forever, and maybe it's time to get younger.
This is the one range where I would be more okay with taking a defensive lineman if it's like with their second, fourth rounder. I think realistically that's the spot where you kind of feel like you're not getting a high-end prospect, but you're getting a guy who could be a valuable contributor to you. The Steelers have done well in the past getting mid-round D linemen. I mean, obviously there's Tuitt and there's Hayward, but there's also the Javon Hargrave, who's a third-round pick. You have Buggs, who's a sixth-round pick. Callers was a sixth-round pick, I believe. I don't think it was seventh. I think it was a sixth-rounder. You have these guys that have kind of filled in the holes there. Steve McClendon was an undrafted guy. They love guys that they feel they can get certain traits out of. They want their top-tier players, but they want good depth. Fourth round, fifth round, things you're going to find then along the D line, especially third round. But I just think with their scenario, with the situation, it's too early to say one in the third round. So I think this would be the spot D line kind of starts playing a spot for me. It's kind of flavor depending on what type of guy you want. I think the Steelers are going to move more towards scheme versatile D linemen because they have the ability to blitz the way they blitz and rush the passer the way they do, and they have a secondary that can hold up under pressure right now. I don't think they're going for the traditional nose tackle. So fans can keep pounding that drum. It's not going to happen, in my opinion, because you're not going to draft a premium nose tackle who is going to play 25% to 30% of the snaps this season. Javon Hargrave saw the snap count he did, which was a career high because of Tuitt's injury. Had Tuitt not gotten hurt, Hargrave is in the same 35 to 45% of his snaps like he was before. He got 62, if I'm not mistaken. I forget the exact numbers this year because of the injuries to Tuitt. And they were still rotating Alualu in. They were still rotating Buggs in. They were still rotating Dan McCullers in at times. And the Steelers also really love Henry Monado. So I don't think that it's a given they're going to take a D lineman. But this is the range I wouldn't mind. Again, edge. At this point, if you're drafting an edge rusher in the fourth round, you're drafting for depth. That's really any position. But I think, like I said, edge seems to be one of those positions that has a lot of fall off. You're going to find some pass rushing specialists in the mid rounds, like a Max Crosby. Another shout out to Eric because I know that's one of his guys again. You're going to find a mid round guy like that who's a pass rushing specialist, but he's not going to necessarily be the guy that you want on the field all down. So T.J. Watt, Bud Dupree, they're three down edge rushers that are good against the run and against the pass. And I don't really think you need a pass rushing specialist. I think you need more of a guy that can rely on to have on the field consistently. But I just think, I'm not sold on drafting mid-round edge rushers for necessity because I don't think you're getting the same type of talent at that level like you would a receiver or a running back or even an offense or a defensive lineman. I think you can find more quality players at that point in the draft at those positions than you can at edge rusher. I think the premium edge rushers go early because there's a premium on them because that's the way the league operates. And if you're not one of those guys, you fall because you don't do it at the premium level. So I think, again, this would be a good spot for a depth safety, I think, as well, if you're looking for one of those guys. And again, I haven't looked at a lot of them because of the fact that I don't care because they have Nick Fitzpatrick and Terrell Edmonds. So I think this would be a good spot for that because you're not drafting for us. Like around the area, they took Marcus Allen in the fifth round. We've seen them take guys like Shamarko Thomas in the fourth round. Congratulations to him, by the way, for being traded to the Renegades, I believe I saw in the XFL. So, you have an opportunity to get a guy like that. But receiver, I do like Hodgins, like you said, out of Oregon State. He's a very tall, long receiver. I think he's more – I look at him like a Tyler Boyd type. I like him a lot, though. I think any other year he'd go higher, but because it's such a historically deep class, you're going to see a guy like him fall in the fourth, fifth round, potentially, if a team doesn't fall in love with his testing. And again, tight end, I'm not a fan of drafting a tight end at this spot because you just drafted Zach Gentry in this spot. You're not going to draft a guy that's going to do that if you're looking for just a depth. And there are some players that I think could be good in that regard because of the fact, like the one player I think is a half decent one in this capacity, especially with the size and whatnot, is the tight end from Missouri, who I'm not going to butcher his name on the podcast, but Albert Okwuegbunam, I think. We're
Your guess is as good as mine, my friend.
We're going to roll with it. I just know he's been fun to watch. He's kind of like a not primary tight end, but I think he could fit the role that Nick Vannett left the Steelers with last year. I think realistically, if he can develop and get to a point where he can contribute, he could be a very good one. I don't think he's an explosive tight end, but I think he knows how to use his body very well when it comes to pass or run blocking. Excuse me. I think he kind of goes. He kind of shows some of those things we were just talking about with Thaddeus Moss, where he can kind of do well underneath, kind of find cushions in zone and just kind of catch the ball. And I'm not saying he's an elite run blocker because he's not, but I think he shows enough effort to kind of make you want to do it. But he has a lot of work to do in that regard. But if you're going to draft a tight end at this point in the draft, you might as well go with a guy who at least has some traits you like, because you're going to find another Zach Gentry type who I still think can develop. But Gentry's not a premier starting tight end. He's a depth tight end. I think anyone you draft at this point is a depth tight end, because you can't rely on finding the next George Kittle at this point, or the next Travis Kelce or Zach Ertz. You kind of have to assume you're going to be drafting a mid-tier depth guy and hope he becomes more. And again, running back, maybe you find one there. Some of the mid-round running backs, they fell in with Benny Snell. You can always find running backs at any point in the draft that can kind of fit your needs if you really want to. I just don't think running back is going to end up being a pressing need for them if they missed out on one early, because you already have guys like Benny Snell, Kareth White, Jalen Samuels, who are all mid-round guys. You always bring in undrafted free agent running backs. Do you really need to add another one in the middle of the draft? I don't think so. You already have guys at that caliber on your roster. If you're going to try to really improve the position, you should try to improve the position early on. But the one thing about this draft that I think fans should be open-minded to is the Steelers really don't have ridiculously pressing needs. Obviously, depending on how free agency goes, like Bud Dupree, you have guys that could potentially rise or fall on boards, and the Steelers could go there. But I think the Steelers are in a position to go best player available in a lot of rounds to really kind of restock, reload, and refuel for the future, because I don't think that they're in a rebuilding phase. I don't think they're close to rebuilding phase, but I think they can really add pieces at positions that may not be a big need now, but might be a big need in a year or two or three, which is the way the Steelers always used to operate when they had these deep teams. You didn't have to draft a starter. You could have your first rounder could learn. I mean, Cam Hayward didn't start as a rookie. Ziggy Hood got a lot of time, but he wasn't the guy in reality, especially on the defensive side of the ball. I think the Steelers can get to a point where you can put a rookie in a low-pressure environment to get him to learn, see where he can kind of develop, and hope that he comes into a player so there's no pressure and there's none of this whole, well, this guy sucks because he's not a all-pro as a rookie. We drafted him in the 5th round. Why? Why is he not an all-pro yet? So I think going BPA would be the best course of action here, so you're not forcing yourself to reach on guys that aren't going to fit the need that you need. And this all comes down to free agency. We have no idea at this point what's going to happen because it's so early and guys are still moving around. And we all know how people like to freak out on draft Twitter because someone unexpectedly runs a 4.2 at 380 pounds. So, we always want to pay attention to that stuff at a later date. But I just think there's a lot of ways this draft can go for the Steelers. I do think it will end up being an offensive-heavy draft because you can't ignore the offense at a premium for as long as the Steelers have when they've drafted defense early for how long now. So you have to start putting some of those high-end premium resources back into your offense to try to restock and get some of those bloods flowing. And it can't just be receivers every single year like the Steelers have done where they draft offense early in the form of a receiver. You have to go offensive line. You have to go tight end if there's one you like that are available, running back potentially. So we'll see, though. It's still very early.
Absolutely. It's still very early in the process. But you make excellent points, and hopefully, we gave some folks some names to look at, and we may not that Zach will want us to do this, but we may not talk draft for a few weeks now, because there's some other topics that we need to cover. But as it, we'll get back into the swing of it. We'll be having our own live mock drafts or recorded mock drafts, and we'll do all kinds of crazy stuff before the draft season wraps up. But I think that puts a bow on this edition of the podcast. Zachariah, I appreciate you spending some time with me again and talking a little draft football.
Well, I'm disappointed in the fact that we're going to be taking a break from draft here. It's still the best 3 months of the year. No one's going to ever change my mind. I appreciate being back on here, Brian. Always enjoy it. Absolutely.
And so for everybody else, Zach, remind them if they want to follow you out on Twitter, since you are part of the draft Twitter, how do they get to you?
I like to think myself as part of the more sensible draft Twitter that doesn't think every player is going to be a future Hall of Fame first-round pick. You can reach out to me and follow me at GZSports_ZM I look forward to interacting with you all and being trolled.
And if you want to listen to me rant, you can follow me at Cannons Don't Thun. If you don't understand what the reference is, it's because you're younger than I am. And you can ask me and I'll tell you. But I've talked about it on the podcast in the past. That's going to wrap it up for this time around. We appreciate if you give us the likes, if you give us the subscribes, and when you leave the comments, trust me, doesn't matter whether they're good or bad. We take it all in, and we like it, and we love it, and we appreciate you guys for listening. So have a lovely evening or morning or whenever you're listening. And as we like to say, it's chaos out there, so be kind.
We would like to thank you for listening and remind our listeners to follow us on social media and our website, www.steelcityunderground.com.